And we pretty much know that the targeting hasn't really gotten better. If anything, it has gotten worse because of Safari. But then also it has gotten better again because of bridging and otherwise. But yet still we see that there's now this kind of segment on, let's say, like the bottom 50% of the users that are not being monetized as well anymore as they used to be.
So welcome to DPO Mastery, traffic shaping for revenue growth. I've got Nils and I've got Chris with me today to have a great conversation to talk about traffic shaping and really the swirling changes that are going on really within the open marketplace. I think it seems, well, I don't know, everything seems to get faster and crazier as the world goes on and so forth. And I think that a lot is going on right now. Want to dive into that as much as we can and try to figure out and give people really kind of a plan on how to move forward. So Nils, I'm going to throw it to you first, if you don't mind, I want you to talk a little bit about kind of what you're seeing, traffic shaping as a concept and so forth. And then let's dive in.
Thank you, Rob. So when we look at the publisher's historic bid landscape, when we look at what kind of levels do bids come in, and we're dividing it on basically like based on the amount and the height of the bids coming in, what we are seeing year over year, or have been seeing year over year, especially the last 3 years, is that the difference between the bids is increasing. And we pretty much know that the targeting hasn't really gotten better. If anything, it has gotten worse because of Safari. But then also it has gotten better again because of bridging and otherwise. But yet still we see that there's now this kind of segment on, let's say, like the bottom 50% of the users that are not being monetized as well anymore as they used to be. And that despite other things in the market happening where they should actually be improving.
So you're seeing a separation then in terms of, again, how the quality of the inventory is being looked at. It's definitely starting to separate between a top and a bottom in terms of, like, again, what the value is being placed on by the marketplace, right?
Yeah, if we look at, like, let's say 2 years ago, maybe the difference between like the median 50% quantile versus the 25 versus the 75 was 3-4 times difference. If you look at it nowadays, for many publishers, it's oftentimes even 10 times the difference. So there's really this like huge gap, or this huge increase in, from we had like a relatively like flat, or not flat, but relatively like even and nice curve in terms of like a revenue per user or the revenue per available inventory per supply. But now it's really been shifting towards this part that is completely being under monetized, and this is part that is, I wouldn't say over monetized, but it is like, yeah, it's really way above what it used to be.
Well, and that, Chris, probably goes into some of the things that you've been talking about recently at events and articles and so forth, and your own research of just some of the changing dynamics that are happening in terms of how impressions are bought and sold. Do you want to kind of expand on that and how maybe that ties to what Nils is seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Nils said is source of truth. That is real revenue data from a diversity of publishers. I think Assertive Yield probably has at least as good a line of sight into that dispersion as anyone in the space, although I've heard similar things from other publishers that there's more and more competition at sort of like the high end of that distribution curve, and a thinning out of density in sort of like the torso and tail of lower value impressions. And so it just feels very consistent to me. And then I think, frankly, beyond that, maybe we'll park that for a minute. There's a separate thing that we also know is a fact, which is that from the sell side of the market, publishers, their SSP partners, intermediaries are pushing more and more auction volume into the supply side of the AdTech supply chain. And while that volume is growing, DSPs are either listening to the same amount of QPS or less QPS than they did 3 years ago. And so we know with confidence that there is a large and growing amount of filtering of the bidstream. To take that like a half a step further in a way that I think I could sort of defend with some metrics, we think the total bidstream, the total volume of auctions that are being pushed into the supply side of the supply chain is about 30 million auctions per second. The average DSP listens to about 3 million auctions per second. And so there's roughly 90% filtering, meaning 9 out of every 10 times that the sell side tries to run an auction, the DSP doesn't know that that auction exists. So what Nils said, I think, is clearly in the territory of like knowable facts. what I just said, I think, is in the territory of knowable facts. And then there's this sort of like logical leap that like maybe those things are connected. And I think they probably are, but I think we need to be really clear on like, what do we know and what are we guessing? I'm guessing that the thing that Nils said and the thing that I said are connected.
I love just that, the kind of the honesty on that part of it, because again, there's so many kind of dynamics to this. To what Chris said, Nils, like your take then on traffic shaping. So why don't we talk about this? Because in one sense, for what you just said, where we're starting in terms of facts, right? How SSPs are reacting to the flood coming from the publishers, right? The DSPs reaction to the SSPs, and then let's take it kind of back to the publisher, who kind of create that circle and so forth. So what do you know that's going on the SSP side when it comes to all the duplication of requests, to the way that publishers are trying to monetize every single impression, and then they have to turn around and communicate that to a DSP? How are they handling that?
I think it's also a good fact that it pretty much always produces more revenue for the publisher in a direct A/B test the more paths they have to the demand side, no matter through which pipes they're going through. In an A/B test, immediate feedback, it's always positive. Long-term perspective, we don't know, because there's so much market fluctuation, and adding one more bidder makes 1%, 0.5% difference. Now, the SSP themselves, they have their own optimization to do in terms of controlling their costs. So and then they have to maintain relationships with the DSPs. And these are two separate things quite often. They are aligned, but they are also separate. So when the SSP is optimizing their own engine for running the auctions, it is usually a multi-layered approach. There's one level of filtering that occurs on the inbound side when the traffic is coming in. Their decision is being made, do we actually completely ignore or reject that incoming request? And that information oftentimes is based on where is it coming from. Is it coming from domain A, B, seed ID A, B, that placement ID? Does it have EIDs available? Is it interesting? But it also often looks at what path did it come through. Was it through a pre-bid JS integration? Was it through a server-side integration? Was it through TAM? And so on. But all of these decisions that happen within the first instance, for at least all the SSPs I know, and they know how their tech is working, they are not looking at duplication. Because actually in real time it is pretty much impossible to deduplicate. So the decision is based on, okay, this request looks good, we send it through. But if we got the same request 5 times, we send through all 5 of them. Now when we then look at the one level further, the connection to the DSP. And there's one thing which SSPs quite often look at, that is the auction size. And the auction size is a metric that basically determines what is the average amount of DSPs we have in an auction. And that number has decreased a lot over the years, subject to the decrease in QPS caps from the DSPs, because they of course need to remain economical, but also due to the increase of incoming traffic. Supply has never been an issue in this industry. So now we have to make a decision as an SSP, what are we going to send out? But again, it is really difficult to deduplicate. And as far as I know, deduplication does not happen, because it is almost impossible to do it well, due to how real-time everything is happening within milliseconds. So when the decision is being made, usually we have 5 incoming requests, the decision was made, it's interesting for 3 DSPs, and all 5 requests go to the same 3 DSPs.
And that seems like, again, with that duplication, then just that one good opportunity is crowding out. In your example, that being 5 of the same requests, you're crowding out 4 other either publishers or other inventory or whatever. And so I think that obviously throws off really the ability for them, for us to understand exactly the value across these things, because there's that kind of crowding out, all kind of racing toward the DSP.
The crowding out language, I think, is really important, because for a long time, there wasn't really much of a notion of crowding out. It was sort of like if a publisher integrated a 7th or 8th or 9th SSP, if a publisher took a single SSP and integrated it through client-side pre-bid plus maybe 1 or more server-side wrappers, it was more is more. And it was just that there was a greater volume of requests from this publisher that would be presented to the DSP. And I think So if the SSP is tasked with bringing the maximum amount of revenue through its pipe back to a publisher, that's the thing that SSP should rationally do. It's just not helpful to anyone else in the supply chain. That's not helpful to the publisher, and that's not helpful to the DSP. It's the logical self-interest of the SSP, though.